My name is Jennifer Jackson. I am 27 years old, and last Christmas Eve my dad led me outside, telling me he wanted a private word. The lights of the house glowed warm behind us, the laughter of guests echoing in the air, and then suddenly his hands shoved me hard into the lake. The freezing water swallowed me, pulling me under my chest, burning as I sank. Through the blur, I heard him and my stepmother laughing as they walked away. I thought it was the end, until a hand dragged me back and a voice whispered a truth even crueler than what had just happened. Christmas Eve in Vermont carried a silence that felt older than the house itself. Snow pressed down on the pines and softened the roads until the only sound was the crunch of boots breaking through icy layers. I remember standing at the edge of my dad's driveway that night with my suitcase in hand, staring at the house that had defined so much of my childhood. The windows glowed with yellow light, wreaths hung on every frame, and from inside came bursts of laughter that rose above the hum of music. It looked perfect from the outside, almost like something from one of those glossy magazines that pile up in waiting rooms. But inside that house, perfection was only a performance. I felt the sting of cold on my cheeks as I pulled open the heavy wooden door. Heat rushed over me, carrying with it the scent of pine garland, cinnamon sticks, and roasted turkey. Every year, the house transformed into a stage set for James Jackson, my dad. He loved Christmas, or at least he loved what Christmas did for his image. The mayor used to stop by. Lawyers and bankers brought bottles of wine, and neighbors who had once whispered about my mother's disappearance filled their plates at his table. I forced my boots onto the mat and brushed the snow from my coat. Sophie spotted me first. My half-sister stood at the center of the foyer, phone in hand, streaming herself live to hundreds of strangers. Her red dress glittered under the chandelier. She looked every bit the glamorous influencer she had become in New York, and she knew it. She smiled wide for her followers, then narrowed her eyes at me, breaking character for just a second. "Back already, Jen?" She tilted her head. "Thought you would be spending Christmas alone this year." Her voice carried far enough for others to hear. I clenched my jaw and kept moving. Behind her, Hannah appeared in a silver gown, her hair pinned perfectly. She kissed the air near my cheek and whispered low enough that only I could. "Here, try to keep it together tonight. We would not want to spoil your dad's holiday." I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak. The living room was crowded. Men in tailored suits leaned against the mantel, while women in sparkling jewelry circled the dining table. Glasses clinked. A fire roared. My dad stood in the middle of it all, shaking hands, his booming laugh carrying above every other sound. James Jackson knew how to command a room. At 55, he still looked powerful, broad-shouldered with salt and pepper hair cut neat. When his eyes landed on me, he spread his arms wide. "There she is. My daughter made it." He pulled me into a quick hug that felt more like a show than affection. Guests smiled, nodding at what they assumed was a tender reunion. If only they could feel the stiffness in his grip, the calculation in his eyes. Dinner was served on long oak tables covered in white cloth. Platters of ham and bowls of mashed potatoes filled the center. Candles flickered against polished silver. I sat quietly near the end while Sophie told stories about her brand, partnerships. Hannah laughed at everything, and James boasted about golf scores and cases he had won years ago. Every word felt like theater. At one point, Sophie looked straight at me and said to the table that she hoped someday I would find a real job and not just scrape by on odd teaching gigs. The guests chuckled politely. I pressed my palms into my lap, forcing myself not to respond. My dad did not correct her. He sipped his wine with a smirk. The weight of the house pressed in on me. Memories rose without invitation. I saw my mother Anna standing at the same table years earlier, carving turkey with steady hands, humming under her breath. The memory of her voice felt like a ghost brushing against my skin. Then came the image of the night she vanished in 2012, the way my dad told me she could not handle the pressure and left us. I had believed him for too long. Later in the evening, after the gifts had been opened and dessert trays cleared, James laid a hand on my shoulder. His smile did not reach his eyes. "Walk with me, Jennifer, just a minute." I followed him through the back door onto the deck. The cold hit me sharp, cutting through my thin sweater. The lake stretched black under the moonlight, patches of ice forming near the shore. Our boots crunched as we walked down the steps. He spoke in that calm tone he used in courtrooms. "I know you have been restless. I know you still have questions about the past. But tonight is not the night to dig up ghosts." I tried to answer, but my throat closed. The silence between us grew heavy. We reached the edge of the dock. He looked at me, then really looked, his jaw tight. Sometimes silence is safer for everyone. Before I could react, he shoved me hard. My body flew forward into the freezing water. The shock stole my breath. Ice-cold waves closed over my head. Darkness swallowed me. I kicked upward, but the layers of clothing dragged me down. My chest burned. The muffled world filled with the distorted sound of laughter. I heard Hannah's voice, high and cruel, mixing with my dad's deep chuckle as they turned and walked away. I thrashed my lungs, screaming, vision blurring. Panic clawed at me. The surface felt impossibly far. My hands scraped against icy water, searching for air that was not there. For a moment, I thought this was the end. I thought about my mother, about how she must have felt if she too had been betrayed by the man she trusted. Just as the dark closed and a strong grip clamped around my arm, a surge pulled me upward, breaking the surface. I gasped, choking my lungs searing as air rushed back inside. Snow fell into my eyes. A voice cut through the chaos. "Jennifer, breathe. I have you." It was Ethan Walker. His face blurred above me, wet hair clinging to his forehead. He dragged me onto the dock, his hands steady though mine shook uncontrollably. I coughed water onto the wood body, convulsing. Ethan wrapped his jacket around me and leaned close. His voice was a whisper meant only for me. "They think you are gone. But the truth about your mother is worse than death." My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I turned to question him, but headlights flashed from the house. Someone was watching from the deck above. I woke to the sound of water dripping somewhere close and the sharp smell of damp wood. My body ached as if I had been crushed under the weight of the lake itself. When I tried to move, a blanket slid from my shoulders, and I realized I was lying on a narrow cot inside a cabin. The room was dim, lit only by the orange glow of a small wood stove in the corner. I could hear the wind pressing against the walls, whistling through cracks in the frame. For a moment, I did not know where I was. Then memory struck like lightning. My dad's hand, the shove, the cold black water, the muffled laughter. Panic rose in my chest and I jerked upright. My throat burned raw from swallowing water, and my lungs tightened as if they might collapse again. I coughed violently, clutching my chest. The door creaked and Ethan stepped inside carrying a steaming mug. His jacket was damp and his hair still wet from the lake. He moved quickly to my side, steadying me with a hand on my shoulder. "Easy. You are safe now." Safe. The word sounded foreign. Nothing about this felt safe. "What happened out there, Ethan? Did you hear them?" My voice cracked, every word scraping my throat. He looked at me for the long time before answering. His jaw clenched the way it always did when he carried something heavy. "I saw enough. Your dad wanted you gone. Hannah, too. They think you drowned tonight." I shook my head, my teeth chattering. "That cannot be real. That cannot be true." But it was. His eyes held mine steady and unwavering. "I know what I heard. I know what I saw." The room spun around me. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to block out the image of them walking away. The man who had raised me, the woman who pretended to welcome me. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, some misunderstanding, but deep down I knew Ethan would not lie. He handed me the mug. "Drink. It will help." The tea scalded my tongue, but the warmth spread slowly through my body. My hands trembled so badly I had to grip the cup with both. "Why are you helping me?" I whispered. "Why not tell everyone what they did? Because if you are going to survive this, you need more than one wild accusation." Ethan sat across from me, elbows on his knees. "People trust your dad. He has built that trust for decades. Nobody will believe he tried to kill you without proof." His words cut deeper than the lake water. Proof, as if my word meant nothing. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn and yellowed around the edges. He slid it across the small table between us. "I found this months ago in an old box my dad stored in the barn. It belonged to your mother." My breath caught. The handwriting was familiar the moment my eyes touched it. The loops of the letters, the way the ink bled slightly into the page. Anna Jackson, my mother. She had been gone for 12 years, vanished without a trace, and all I had left were photographs fading in frames. I unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. "If something happens to me, it will not be an accident. I am afraid of the people closest to me." The words blurred through my tears. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would rip through my ribs. I pressed the paper to my chest, closing my eyes. All these years I believed the story James told. That my mother left because she could not handle life here. That she walked away from me. The ache of abandonment had shaped everything, had carved out holes inside me. And now in this cabin with water still dripping from my hair, I realized the truth might be far darker. I looked at Ethan. "Why do you have this? Why did you not show me sooner? I wanted to." He rubbed the back of his neck. "But I did not know if I could trust you. You kept coming back to him, to this house. I thought maybe you were blind to what he really is. But when I saw him push you tonight, I knew I could not keep this from you any longer." I pressed my hands to my face, feeling the heat of anger rise beneath my skin. Blind, that was the right word. I had been blind for too long. Through the thin walls of the cabin, I heard the faint sound of a car engine starting somewhere near the road. I froze. Ethan moved to the window, pulling the curtain just enough to peek out. His shoulders stiffened. "Someone is out there," he said, watching. Fear surged through me again. My dad had not wasted time. If he thought I was still alive, he would make sure to finish what he started. Ethan turned back, his eyes hard. "You cannot go back to that house tonight. Stay here. We will figure out what to do." I gripped the edge of the cot nails, digging into the wood. I wanted to believe him to let myself rest, but images of Hannah's smirk and my dad's laugh kept me awake. Every creak of the cabin made me flinch. Hours crawled by. The stove crackled. Snow piled against the window. I could not stop staring at the letter. My mother's warning. It felt like she was whispering through time, begging me to see what she had seen. Ethan finally spoke again, softer now. "Jennifer, I need you to understand something. This is not only about what happened tonight. There are things about your family, about your mother, that you do not know. Things that will break you if you are not ready." I met his gaze, my throat tight. "Tell me." "Not yet." His voice was firm. "First, we need to make sure you are safe. Then we gather proof. Then you decide how far you want to go." The firelight flickered across his face, shadowing his eyes. My mind raced with questions, but exhaustion pulled at me. I curled beneath the blanket, clutching the letter like it might vanish if I let go. Sleep came in jagged pieces. Every time I drifted off, I was back in the water, lungs burning, hands clawing for the surface. I woke up gasping, sweat chilling against my skin. Ethan sat near the stove watching, as if he knew the nightmares would not leave me. When dawn finally bled pale across the window, I sat up. The world outside was silent, heavy with snow. I felt older than the night before, as if the lake had stolen something from me. I wrapped the blanket tighter and whispered to myself, "If they want me gone, they will learn what it means when I come back." By the time the sun rose fully above the lake the next morning, the world outside Ethan's cabin looked untouched, as if the chaos of the night before had never happened. Snow lay smooth and unbroken, glinting beneath the pale light. But inside me nothing was untouched. I felt raw, stripped down, every nerve sharpened by the memory of water filling my lungs and the sound of my dad laughing as he walked away. I should have been dead. Instead, I was alive and carrying a letter that told me my mother had never left by choice. I knew I could not stay hidden in that cabin forever. If my dad believed I had drowned, that illusion would not last long. Someone at the party might already be whispering about how quickly I vanished. Hannah would notice my absence at breakfast. Sophie might be spinning her version of events to her followers. If I stayed away too long, suspicion would turn into questions. Ethan tried to convince me otherwise. He stood at the counter, hands braced against the wood. "You cannot go back in there like nothing happened. They will watch every move you make." I tightened the blanket around my shoulders. If I do not go back, they will know for sure. I need them to believe I am still under their control. That is the only way I can learn the truth. His jaw tightened, but he did not argue further. He knew me well enough to see that my mind was set. By late morning, I was walking back up the driveway of the Jackson estate, my body still heavy with fatigue. I had changed into dry clothes Ethan kept in the cabin, but the chill in my bones had not lifted. Every step closer to the front door made my heart pound harder. I thought about the headlights I had seen at the dock, the shadow watching us. Whoever that was, they might already have told James I had survived. When I pushed open the door, warmth and noise spilled over me. The house was alive with movement. A brunch had been laid out on the long dining table. Platters of pastries, pitchers of orange juice, bowls of fruit, plates of smoked salmon. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. Guests laughed, their voices echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Sophie stood near the window, her phone angled high as she live-streamed herself describing the spread. Her red lipstick gleamed. Behind her, Hannah moved gracefully from guest to guest, topping off glasses, her silver bracelet jingling with every gesture. She looked up when I entered, her expression smooth, practiced, as if she had not watched me sink beneath the lake hours earlier. "Jennifer." Her smile stretched wide. "There you are? We were wondering when you would join us." I forced a small smile, letting my eyes drop to the floor so no one would see the fury burning there. I slid into a chair at the edge of the table, choosing a plate but not touching the food. Sophie turned her camera toward me for a moment. "Look who finally decided to show up." She let out a tinkling laugh, her followers eating up every word. I clenched my fork until the metal bit into my palm. To the people watching her stream, I was the awkward older sister who could never quite keep up, the one with no career worth bragging about. They did not see the truth behind the camera, the cruelty behind her smile. My dad entered the room, then dressed in a crisp navy sweater, his hair combed back. He carried himself like a man with nothing to hide. His eyes swept over the guests, then landed on me. For one split second, something cold flashed there. Recognition that I was not supposed to be sitting at his table. But it vanished as quickly as it came. He smiled, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Glad you could join us." He turned to the others, family together on Christmas morning. "That is what matters most." The guests murmured their agreement, raising glasses. To them, we were the picture of harmony. A wealthy family gathered in a grand house celebrating tradition. None of them saw the fracture lines running beneath the surface. As I picked at the edge of a croissant, I studied each face around me. My dad's jaw was tightening when he thought no one was looking. Hannah's eyes sharp with calculation beneath her polished mask. Sophie's constant glance toward her phone, desperate to keep her followers enthralled. Every detail was a thread I tucked away, proof that the perfection they displayed was nothing more than costume. A woman across the table complimented Hannah on the decor, marveling at the floral centerpieces and the glimmering ornaments on the tree. Hannah laughed, tossing her hair, and said she wanted to create an atmosphere of warmth. Warmth. The word nearly made me choke. I thought of the ice burning my skin, of her laughter echoing across the water. When the plates were nearly empty and the guests settled back with mimosas, my dad leaned toward Hannah, speaking low. I caught only fragments, but they sliced deep. It should have been done. If she is here, someone interferes. Hannah's smile never faltered as she refilled a glass. We will handle it. I forced myself to keep my gaze steady on the table as if I had not heard. My pulse hammered in my ears. Moments later, Sophie lifted her phone again, pouting for the camera. "My family is everything." She leaned close to Hannah, who kissed her cheek. The comments scrolled fast on the screen, strangers praising their beauty, their bond. Sophie basked in it, angling her phone toward me with a mischievous grin. "Say hi, Jen." I lifted a hand, my smile brittle. Inside me, something hardened. Let them perform. Let them shine in their staged perfection. I would be the quiet audience for now, collecting every slip, every whisper. When the guests drifted toward the living room, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I slipped away into the hallway, heart racing as I read the message glowing on the screen. "If you want to know the truth about Anna, meet me tonight." No name. No number I recognized. My breath caught. Someone else knew. Someone else was willing to speak. I tucked the phone away, forcing my face back into calm as I returned to the group. Laughter rang out, glasses clinked, the fire crackled. To anyone watching, it was a scene of joy. To me, it was a stage and every actor was playing a part. I sat quietly, my mind no longer on the pastries or the music, but on the night ahead. Somewhere out there, beyond the walls of this gilded prison, waited answers. The hours crawled by until evening settled over the Jackson estate. From the windows of the guest room where I hid myself for most of the afternoon, I could see the lake frozen under the pale glow of the moon. My phone lay on the quilt beside me, the anonymous message still on the screen. "If you want to know the truth about Anna, meet me tonight." The words pulsed in my mind until I could no longer sit still. I slipped out of the house quietly after dinner, telling Hannah I needed air. She did not press me, only lifted an eyebrow and gave me a smile that carried a sharp edge. I wrapped a scarf around my neck and pulled on gloves, my boots crunching over the snow as I followed the narrow road toward the village. My heart beat fast, the silence of the night making every sound of my steps too loud. The meeting point was an old cafe on Main Street that had closed years ago. Its windows were boarded, the sign cracked from storms, but the parking lot was empty and quiet. A single car sat at the edge of the lot, headlights dim. My breath formed clouds in the air as I approached. The door opened and a woman stepped out, her shoulders hunched against the cold. Jennifer. She spoke my name softly, like she was not sure I would remember her. Margaret Lewis. The name pulled at a memory. My mother's voice once told me about the teacher who had encouraged her to go back to college after she had me, who had sat with her at kitchen tables filled with homework and coffee. Margaret's face carried the lines of years, but her eyes were sharp and kind. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder wrapped in twine. She pressed it into my hands with a tremor. I should have done this long ago. She glanced over her shoulder as if someone might be listening. "Your mother trusted me, Jennifer. She told me things when she was afraid." My fingers fumbled with the twine, the cold making them clumsy. Inside were letters, pages written in the same looping hand I recognized from Ethan's note. My mother's voice spilled out through ink. Fears that James was keeping secrets, that Hannah was not who she claimed to be, that she had discovered money moving in ways that did not make sense. Tears blurred my eyes as I read by the weak light of the street lamp. Margaret laid a hand on my arm. Anna came to me the week before she vanished. She said she was preparing to leave James. She had contacted a young lawyer in Boston, a woman named Helen Brooks, to help her file for divorce, but then she grew terrified. She said someone was watching her. She told me if anything happened, I must tell you the truth when you are old enough. The weight of the words pressed against my chest. My mother had not abandoned me. She had been silenced. Why now? I looked up at Margaret, my voice raw. Why wait 12 years? She shook her head, tears glinting in her eyes. Fear. James is powerful. He has friends in law enforcement in the courts. I was afraid. But when I saw you return to that house, I could not stay silent. I clutched the folder to my chest. The paper felt heavier than stone. My mother's warnings were here proof that the story my dad told was a lie. Margaret reached into her coat again and handed me a photograph. It was old edges curling but clear. My mother stood outside a brick building, smiling faintly. Beside her was a younger Helen Brooks, her hair shorter, her arm looped with files. Helen can confirm what I am telling you, Margaret whispered. But be careful. If James learns you are looking, he will not hesitate. The sound of tires screeching cut through the night. A black SUV pulled into the lot, its headlights blazing. Margaret's eyes widened. She pushed the folder into my arms. Go! Now! I stumbled back, clutching the papers as the SUV slowed. My pulse was hammered. I could not make out who sat behind the wheel, but the presence was enough. Margaret stepped forward, waving me off. Run, Jennifer! I turned and bolted down the side street, snow crunching loud beneath my boots. My breath tore in my throat, cold air burning my lungs. I ducked behind a row of trees, heart pounding as the SUV rolled past slowly, its beams sweeping the road. When the sound faded, I pressed my back to the tree and tried to steady my breath. My hands shook so hard the papers crumpled. Somewhere behind me, Margaret remained in that lot, and I prayed she would be safe. The walk back to the estate felt endless. Every set of headlights on the road made me flinch. My scarf was damp with sweat by the time I slipped through the back door and into the kitchen. The house was quiet, only the ticking of the granddad clock in the hall. I hurried to my room and locked the door, spreading the papers across the bed. My mother's words leapt up at me, warnings written 12 years ago. James was hiding something. Hannah was involved. And there had been a plan to leave to fight to protect me. I picked up the photograph of Helen Brooks. My mother had trusted her. If Helen was still practicing law, she might hold pieces of the puzzle no one else could. As I gathered the papers, headlights swept across the window of my room. My heart stopped. I froze in place, clutching the photograph. Someone was outside. The beams lingered for a moment before sliding away. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating. I moved to the window and peered through the curtain. Only snow and shadows. But I knew what I had seen. They were watching me. Morning broke gray and heavy, the kind of light that flattened everything and made the snow outside look like ash instead of diamonds. I had barely slept after meeting Margaret. My body felt hollow, but my mind burned with her words, with the papers now hidden in the bottom of my suitcase under layers of clothes. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's handwriting again. The warning she had written, the fear pressed into every line. I sat at the vanity in the guest room, staring at my own reflection. My hair was tangled, my skin pale from lack of sleep, but it was my eyes that startled me most. They looked different now, sharper, as if I had stepped across a line I could never return from. I told myself I would be careful, that I would move slowly, but the fire inside me wanted more than caution. It wanted answers. When I went downstairs, Sophie's laughter floated from the kitchen. She was on the phone, her voice bright and performative. I hovered in the doorway, watching as she twirled a strand of hair and leaned against the counter, phone propped up so her face glowed in the screen light. She was talking to a manager or brand agent, I guessed. I heard snippets about contracts, engagement rates, and an upcoming campaign in New York. Her entire world spun around image, and she lived for the validation of strangers who adored her curated life. When she finally ended the call, she saw me standing there and rolled her eyes. "Rough night, Jen? You look like you crawled out of a grave." I ignored the jab and walked past her, opening the fridge for water. But my ears caught every detail of the folder left on the counter, pages poking out beneath a glossy brochure. Sophie always left things lying around, assuming no one would dare touch her property. When she walked out to the patio with her phone, I slipped closer. The brochure was for a luxury brand that specialized in partnerships with influencers. Beneath it was a draft contract. I scanned quickly, my stomach tightening as I read. The deal was worth nearly $500,000, but one clause stood out. It required Sophie to maintain her family image, to post content that displayed stability and harmony in the Jackson household. Any scandal, any sign of fracture would void the deal. My fingers trembled as I put the papers back exactly as I had found them. So that was it. Sophie's perfect Instagram smiles were not just vanity, they were surviving. She had tied her career to the illusion of a flawless family, the very illusion my dad and Hannah protected with such viciousness. I carried the knowledge back upstairs like contraband. Sitting on the bed, I pieced it together. My dad's reputation, Hannah's need for control, Sophie's career. They were all bound to the same fragile lie. If I cracked it, everything would crumble. Later that afternoon, I went out to the barn to meet Ethan. The air smelled of hay and old wood. He stood near the workbench, his flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves, hands stained with grease from fixing a generator. When he looked up, his face softened. "You should not be here alone," he said. I told him about Margaret, about the letters, about Sophie's contract. His brows drew tight as he listened. "It makes sense," he said finally. "Your dad built his life on appearances. If Sophie's deal depends on that same image, then all of them will fight to keep the lie intact." I nodded, clutching the edge of the workbench. "I feel like I'm standing on thin ice, Ethan. Every step I take could crack it, and I do not know how deep the water goes." He wiped his hands on a rag and placed them on my shoulders. "Then we move carefully. We gather everything. Proof, witnesses, allies. You cannot go at this alone." His touch was steady, but my heart thudded hard. For years, Ethan had been the quiet boy next door, the one who fixed fences and carried groceries for my mother. Now he was the man who had saved my life, the only one I could trust. When I returned to the house that evening, the sky was turning violet. I climbed the stairs quietly, hoping to slip past Sophie's room, but her door was open. She sat at her vanity lights glowing around the mirror, phone propped to record. She was rehearsing lines, practicing smiles, checking angles. I lingered in the hallway unseen. Her voice was sugar-sweet as she told her followers about the wonderful holiday with her amazing family. But when the recording stopped, her face fell flat. She sighed, muttered under her breath about deadlines and pressure, then shoved a stack of contracts into a drawer. I stepped into the doorway. "Stressful day, Soph?" She jumped, then glared. "God, Jen, do you enjoy sneaking around?" I shrugged, leaning against the frame. "I just think it must be exhausting, pretending." Her eyes narrowed. "You would not understand. Some of us actually work hard to make something of ourselves." I wanted to laugh at the irony, but instead I studied her face. Beneath the sharp words was fear. She needed this deal. She needed the perfect family picture more than she cared to admit. Dinner that night was tense. Hannah kept her smile plastered on, asking the guests about their children's colleges and holiday plans, but her eyes flicked toward me every few minutes, calculating. James carved the roast with a steady hand, his laugh too loud, his charm too polished. Sophie snapped photos of the table for her feed. I sat silently sipping water, feeling like a ghost among the actors. I thought about my mother, about the nights she must have sat here feeling the same weight. I thought about the letters hidden in my suitcase, and the photograph of her with Helen Brooks. Proof was building piece by piece. When the meal ended and guests moved toward the living room, Sophie cornered me near the staircase. Her smile was wide for anyone watching, but her voice was low and sharp. "Stay out of my things, Jen. If you mess this up for me, I swear you will regret it." I leaned closer, matching her smile. "Funny, that sounds exactly like something Dad would say." Her eyes flashed, and for a moment I saw the fear beneath her anger. She turned quickly and walked away, heels clicking against the floor. I climbed the stairs slowly, every nerve buzzing. The walls of this house were built on lies, and I had finally found the cracks. If I pushed hard enough, the whole thing might collapse. But I also knew the danger was closing in, that my dad's patience would not last. When I reached my room, I closed the door and leaned against it, pressing my palms flat to the wood. From the hallway below came the murmur of voices too soft to catch words, but one tone I knew well, my dad's. "It should have been done. If she is digging, we will end it soon." My breath caught. I pressed my ear to the door, but the voices moved away. The silence that followed was louder than any threat. Hannah found me the next morning in the sunroom, her figure framed by the frosted glass windows and the pale winter light. She carried a tray of tea, her bracelets clinking as she set it down on the table between us. Her smile was too sweet, the kind of smile that pressed too hard on my nerves. "You seem restless, Jennifer." Her voice was gentle, almost musical. "You wander the house at odd hours, disappear when people look for you. It makes your dad uneasy." I wrapped my hands around the mug, the heat seeping into my cold fingers. I forced my voice to sound calm. "I have been thinking a lot, that is all. This house is filled with memories." Her smile sharpened as she leaned closer. "Memories can be dangerous. They can twist, mislead. Sometimes it is better to leave them buried." Her words lingered between us, heavy as stone. I met her gaze and said nothing. Later, my dad summoned me to the library. The room smelled of leather and smoke, filled with shelves of books he rarely opened. He stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. The fire snapped in the hearth. Sit. I obeyed, the leather chair cool against my palms. He turned, his eyes piercing. You have been stirring things, Jennifer. Looking where you should not. That kind of behavior ruins families. I held his gaze, though my chest tightened. Families are not ruined by questions. They are ruined by lies. His mouth twitched a flash of irritation, but he smoothed it quickly. You think you are clever. But cleverness can be dangerous when you do not understand the consequences. I felt the weight of his warning but kept my voice steady. I only want the truth. He leaned closer, his shadow falling over me. Sometimes the truth is poison. Sometimes silence keeps you alive. The air between us crackled with unspoken threats. He finally stepped back, dismissing me with a flick of his hand. Go prepare for dinner. We have a guest tonight. The guest arrived at dusk. Richard Hayes, tall and commanding even in his 60s, carried the air of someone used to control. His tailored coat brushed snow from his shoulders as he stepped into the foyer. The staff scrambled to take it, their movements brisk, respectful. My dad greeted him like an old friend, clasping his hand firmly. The dinner table gleamed with silverware and crystal. Hannah oversaw every detail, arranging flowers, lighting candles, ensuring everything shone. Sophie hovered with her phone, snapping photos, already crafting the perfect post. I sat quietly watching. Richard's presence shifted the air. He spoke with authority, his deep voice filling the space. My dad laughed too loudly at his jokes, eager to impress. Hannah's smile glowed brighter than the candles. Halfway through the meal, Richard turned his attention to me. He studied me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he saw beneath the surface. He lifted his glass. To strength. He held the toast steady, his gaze locked on mine. To the one who endures when others would break. The room stilled. My dad's jaw tightened. Hannah's hand paused midway to her glass. Sophie forced a laugh, trying to brush it off. I raised my glass, my pulse thudding. The words felt like a signal, an acknowledgement that someone else in the room saw the cracks in the performance. Dinner dragged on heavy with tension. Richard asked pointed questions, probing about family traditions, about my mother, about the house itself. My dad dodged smoothly. Hannah interjected with practiced charm, but the unease lingered. When the last plate was cleared and the guests began to drift toward the fire, I caught Richard watching me again. He gave the smallest nod, as if telling me to hold steady. Later, when the house quieted and the guests had gone, I lingered on the stairs. My dad's voice carried from the study, low and sharp. Richard knows. He should not, but he does. Hannah's reply was clipped, urgent. Then we need to find out how much, and we need to contain it. My stomach knotted. I slipped back into my room, closing the door softly, my hands trembling. The mask of harmony was cracking, and for the first time I sensed the fear beneath my dad's control. But fear made him dangerous, and I knew the storm had only just begun. I left the estate the following morning, under the pretense of running errands. In town, Hannah watched me from the top of the stairs as I buttoned my coat, her expression unreadable, but she did not stop me. My dad was locked in his study, pacing, making phone calls that carried through the heavy doors. Sophie was busy posing for photographs near the Christmas tree. The timing felt right. The roads were slick with ice, and the wind cut against my face as I drove Ethan's truck down into the village. My hands gripped the wheel tightly. In the passenger seat lay the photograph Margaret had given me, the one of my mother standing beside a young woman who looked confident, even with arms full of case files. Helen Brooks. The name had burned into my mind all night. If she was still practicing law, she might hold the missing pieces of my mother's story. Ethan sat beside me, his jaw tense. He had insisted on coming. We do not know who might be watching, he said. I did not argue. After everything, I needed someone in my corner. We parked outside a modest brick office near the courthouse in town. The sign read Brooks and Associates. My heart pounded as I climbed the steps, the photograph warm from my grip. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. A receptionist looked up, her eyes polite but wary. Is Helen Brooks in today? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. A few minutes later, the door to a corner office opened, and a woman stepped out. She was older now, her hair pinned back neatly, her suit navy blue. But I recognized her from the photograph instantly. Her eyes softened when they landed on me. Jennifer Jackson. She said my name like she had rehearsed it many times in her head. Come in. We followed her into the office. Shelves lined with law books rose high against the walls. Certificates hung in frames, proof of years of battles fought and won. Helen gestured for us to sit. I know why you are here, she said quietly. Your mother came to me in 2012. She wanted a divorce. She was afraid of your dad. The words hit me like a wave. My throat closed as I gripped the arm of the chair. She never told me. Helen shook her head. She wanted to protect you. She told me James had control over finances, over the community, over the way people perceived him. She feared if she left, he would destroy her and take you away. My hands shook as I pulled the photograph from my coat. She gave this to Margaret. She said you could confirm. Helen nodded slowly. That day outside the courthouse was the last time I saw her. She was supposed to meet me the following week to finalize paperwork. She never arrived. I tried to reach her, but her phone was disconnected. Then James showed up at my office with papers of his own, claiming she had left and did not want to continue. Her voice faltered for the first time. He hinted that I should drop the matter. At the time, I was still building my practice. I did not have the power to fight him, and I was afraid. Ethan leaned forward, his voice sharp. Afraid because he threatened you. Helen's silence was enough. I swallowed hard. Do you believe he killed her? Helen looked directly at me. I believe she was silenced. I cannot prove how. But I know Anna Jackson did not leave of her own will. The room blurred with tears. All my life I had lived under the shadow of abandonment, believing my mother had walked away. To hear she had fought to stay to protect me, only to be erased by the man I still had to call Dad, was a wound deeper than any water could cut. Helen reached into her desk and slid over a folder. I kept copies of what we drafted. Property divisions, custody terms. It is not much, but it is evidence that she intended to leave. Combined with her letters, it might start to paint the picture. I clutched the folder, my heart racing. For the first time, proof was built. Not enough to destroy him yet, but enough to show the truth existed. Helen's gaze softened. Jennifer, if you pursue this, you must be ready for war. Your dad has allies, money, and influence. He will not go down quietly. I nodded, my voice low but firm. He tried to drown me in that lake. He thought I would vanish like she did. I am not going anywhere. The meeting ended with Helen promising to stand by me if I chose to move forward. As we stepped back into the cold snow flurries drifted down, Ethan walked close, his hand brushing mine briefly, a silent vow of support. But when we returned to the cabin, the door was ajar. My stomach dropped. We rushed inside. Drawers were pulled open, the mattress flipped, the floor scattered with clothes. The suitcase where I had hidden my mother's letters was empty. I sank to my knees, panic clawing at me. They found it. Ethan cursed under his breath, scanning the room for signs. He pointed to the window where faint scratches marked the frame. Whoever it was had broken in quickly, searching only for what mattered. I pressed my fists to my eyes, rage boiling. Every time I reached for the truth, my dad was one step ahead, erasing it. But this time, I would not stop. The photograph of my mother with Helen still lay safe in my coat. And now Helen herself stood ready to testify. He could not erase all of us. Night closed in heavy. I sat by the stove, staring into the flames, my mind racing with everything Helen had revealed. My mother had fought. She had tried to escape. She had reached out for help. She had not abandoned me. The thought both healed and destroyed me. As the fire crackled, Ethan knelt beside me. They know you are digging. They will come harder now. I lifted my chin, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Let them. Snow fell heavy the next morning. Thick flakes that coated the pines and muffled every sound. The estate looked like something from a postcard, but to me it felt like a fortress. Every window seemed to hold eyes, every hallway carried whispers. I had barely slept after finding the cabin ransacked. The knowledge that someone had broken in, that my mother's letters were gone, gnawed at me with every breath. Still, I forced myself to dress, to walk into the kitchen where Hannah brewed coffee and Sophie fussed with her camera. Good morning, Jennifer. Hannah's tone was syrupy as she poured coffee into delicate cups. You must be tired. Perhaps you should rest more. I took the cup from her hand, letting the heat burn my palm before setting it down untouched. I looked her straight in the eye and said evenly, I dreamed of Mom last night. She was singing by the tree. The flicker in her expression was quick gone in an instant, but I caught it. A sharp twitch in the corner of her mouth, a flick of her eyes toward my dad who had just entered. He ignored me asking about the day's plans, but I knew the memory had landed like a stone in water. That evening, Hannah hosted a small gathering for family friends. The dining room sparkled with candles. The tree glittered with white lights, the air filled with soft jazz. Guests marveled at the decorations, sipping wine, their voices low and admiring. I stayed quiet, but every move I made was deliberate. I spoke of my mother in casual asides, recalling how she used to bake pies, how she read stories by the fire. Each word unsettled my dad just enough to make his glass tremble slightly when he lifted it. At one point, Sophie, careless with her tongue, let something slip. She was bragging about her career, about the contracts she had lined up for the new year. When she laughed and said, "Thank God Hannah has everything under control," Mom would never have been able to keep up. Her words struck me hard, but she did not notice. Then she added with a little smirk, Besides, Mom never was coming back. Not after what Hannah said. The room went silent for a breath, and I caught the quick flare of panic in her eyes as she realized she had spoken too much. My dad cleared his throat, redirecting the conversation, but the damage was done. Later, when the guests were gone, I found Sophie in her room, scrolling through her phone. I shut the door behind me. "What did you mean earlier? What did Hannah say?" She froze, then laughed nervously. "You heard wrong. I was just joking." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I am done with jokes, Sophie. I almost died because of them. Tell me what you know." Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. Her lips trembled. "I saw them, Jen. The night Mom disappeared. I was 12. I heard yelling in the study. Dad was shouting, Hannah was crying. Then it went quiet. When I asked, they told me never to mention it again." Tears welled in her eyes. I wanted to believe Mom had left, but I knew. I always knew. Her voice cracked, and for a moment she was not the polished influencer but the scared girl she had once been. I reached for her hand, but before she could say more, the floor creaked outside the door. A shadow passed. We both froze. Sophie clutched my arm, terror in her eyes. A moment later, we heard the study door slam downstairs, followed by my dad's voice, sharp and angry. "Prepare everything. She is digging too deep." My stomach clenched. He had heard enough to know the truth was slipping through his fingers. That night I lay awake in my room, every sound amplified. The tick of the clock, the groan of the floorboards, the howl of the wind. My mother's photograph with Helen Brooks lay hidden under my pillow, the last piece they had not stolen. I pressed it to my chest and whispered to the darkness, "You will not be erased." Not this time. The final days of December crept in with a biting cold that seemed to pierce bone. The house was dressed for celebration, but tension ran thicker than the garlands that hung from the banisters. My dad moved through the halls with a restless energy, taking calls behind closed doors, his voice muffled but sharp. Hannah shadowed him like a warden always near, always watching me with that smile that cut deeper than any scowl. Sophie drifted between filming holiday content and locking herself in her room, her eyes red when she thought no one noticed. I kept my own mask on. I played the quiet daughter who wandered the house, who smiled politely at guests who helped arrange plates of cookies. Inside, though, my heart hammered with each hour that passed. Helen's folder of legal drafts sat hidden with me now, joined by notes from Emily Parker, my old college friend turned journalist. She had been digging since I first whispered to her about my mother, combing through records, financial statements, Old Town filings. The evidence she uncovered was shocking. One evening, she called, her voice tight with urgency. "I traced irregular transfers in your dad's accounts. Right after your mother vanished in 2012, large sums moved to an offshore account, and 2 weeks later he liquidated one of her life insurance policies. It is all there, Jennifer." I clutched the phone to my ear, cold flooding my veins. He had not only silenced her, he had profited from it. Emily's voice softened. "If you are ready, I can publish, but I think we need to be smart. He will deny everything. You need to show the community in front of people who cannot look away." Her words planted a seed in me that grew through the night. By the time morning came, I knew what I had to do. The annual New Year's dinner was set to be the grandest of the season, a tradition my dad upheld for decades. Politicians, business leaders, family friends, all crammed into the estate to drink champagne and toast to prosperity. If there was ever a moment to reveal the truth, it was there, under the glow of chandeliers, with witnesses who would carry the story beyond these walls. On the night of December 31st, the house gleamed brighter than ever, the driveway filled with sleek cars, the air thick with perfume and cigar smoke. Guests in gowns and tuxedos spilled into the foyer, laughter ringing. Sophie posed at the base of the staircase, her sequined dress sparkling for her camera. Hannah glided among the guests, offering practiced warmth. My dad wore a black suit, his silver hair gleaming under the lights, his smile broad and commanding. I felt the letter of my mother folded against my skin, the photograph of her with Helen tucked safe in my clutch. Ethan stood near the back wall, his eyes on me, steady and ready. Helen herself had come dressed in deep green, her presence quiet but resolute. Emily was there too, her notebook hidden in her purse, waiting. As glasses clinked and the band played softly, my dad raised his hand for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us as we welcome another year. May it be filled with health, happiness, and family." The crowd applauded, raising glasses. I stepped forward before the cheer had faded. My voice shook at first, but the words steadied as they left me. Family. That word has always carried weight for me. My dad taught me it meant loyalty, unity, tradition. But family should also mean truth. And tonight, it is time the truth was spoken. The room quieted. All eyes turned to me. My dad's smile faltered, confusion flashing into rage. Hannah's hand tightened around her glass. Sophie's phone wavered in her grip. I pulled the folded letter from my clutch and held it high. This was written by my mother 12 years ago. She wrote that if something happened to her, it would not be an accident. She was afraid of the people closest to her. Gasps rippled through the guests. I laid the photograph on the table for all to see. This is my mother with attorney Helen Brooks, who helped her prepare to leave my dad. She never abandoned me. She tried to escape, and then she vanished. Helen stepped forward, her voice firm. I can confirm this. Anna Jackson came to me at 2012. She was ready to divorce James. She feared for her safety. When she disappeared, James presented documents claiming she had left voluntarily. But that was a lie. The room buzzed with shock. My dad's face darkened, veins rising in his neck. Lies, all of it. My wife was unstable. She left. This is slander. Emily's voice rang from the crowd, steady and unafraid. Then why did your financial accounts show transfers days after her disappearance? Why did you cash in her life insurance within weeks? The silence that followed was deafening. Guests looked from me to my dad, doubt spreading across their faces. Hannah slammed her glass onto the table, her composure cracking. Enough. Do not listen to her. She is bitter jealous, making stories to ruin this family. But the unraveling had begun. Sophie's phone slipped in her hands, live stream still running. Thousands of her followers were watching, hearing every word. My dad tried again, his voice booming. She is unwell. She drowned in the past and now invents fantasies. Before he could continue, the doors opened and Ethan walked in, a folder under his arm. His boots echoed on the floor as he approached. He pulled out copies of the custody drafts, the financial records, and my mother's letters that had been stolen from the cabin but recovered through Helen's network. He laid them one by one on the table. The truth cannot be erased, Ethan said quietly. Not this time. The crowd surged closer, whispers rising. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled. My dad stood frozen, his empire of control cracking under the weight of evidence. I looked at him not with fear anymore, but with clarity. He had tried to bury me under water, just as he had buried my mother under lies. But I had surfaced carrying her voice with me. The chandelier lights glinted off the tears in my eyes as I said the words, aloud for the first time. You killed her. The silence that followed was absolute, a silence heavy with truth that could not be taken back. The silence after my accusations stretched like a rope pulled taut, threatening to snap. Faces shifted in the candlelight, guests, looking from me to my dad, then to the papers on the table, their eyes wide with disbelief and dread. For years, James Jackson had been a pillar of this community, a man people admired, trusted, even feared. Now he stood in the middle of his own grand dining hall, trembling with rage, cornered by evidence and whispers that spread like fire. He slammed his hand against the table, rattling the crystal glasses. Enough. This circus is over. But it was not over. Not for me, not for the truth, and not for the people who had finally seen through the mask. Helen stepped forward, her voice unwavering. You cannot silence us, James. You cannot bury the truth forever. My dad's eyes blazed, darting from her to Ethan to me. His world was crumbling, and he knew it. Hannah rushed to his side, her face contorted, no longer the composed hostess. She hissed at him in a voice sharp enough for everyone to hear. You promised this would never come out. You told me she would be gone like her mother. Gasps filled the room. Guests drew back as if they had touched flame. I felt the floor steady under me for the first time in years. I stood taller, my voice clear. You just admitted it. Everyone heard you. Sophie's phone was still live, streaming the entire unraveling to her thousands of followers. Her hand shook, but she did not turn it off. Maybe she could not. Maybe some part of her wanted the truth to finally bleed out. Richard Hayes rose from his seat, his presence commanding. He looked at me, then turned to the room. I have known James for decades. I admired his ambition, but ambition turned to rot long ago. Tonight I stand with Jennifer. Reporters pushed forward, cameras flashing, pens scratching. The air was alive with chaos. My dad tried to speak, but his voice was drowned by the crowd's roar. Hannah screamed at them all to leave, her mascara streaking down her cheeks, but no one listened. Then the front doors opened, and uniformed officers stepped inside. Helen had called them earlier, preparing for the possibility this night would spiral. The chief approached, his face grave. James Jackson, we need to speak with you regarding the disappearance of Anna Jackson. The room fell into stunned silence again. My dad straightened, trying to summon the authority that had once bent others to his will. You have no right! I am a respected attorney! I am, but the words faltered as the officers moved closer. The papers on the table, Helen's testimony, Emily's notes, Sophie's live stream. It was enough to crack the armor he had worn for years. Hannah's composure shattered. She clawed at his arm, crying, shouting that it was not her fault, that she had only done what he asked. Her confession spilled like poison, and the guests recoiled further. Sophie dropped her phone, the feed still rolling, as she sank into a chair, covering her face. The image of the perfect family had collapsed before her eyes, and with it her carefully built career. The officers guided my dad toward the door. For a moment his eyes met mine, filled with something I could not name. Anger and fear, and maybe even a flash of regret. But it was too late. The doors closed behind him, leaving a hollow echo in the hall. I stood surrounded by fragments of a life I had never chosen. The house that had once been my prison now felt stripped bare, the walls no longer able to hide the truth. My chest ached with grief for my mother, but also with a fierce kind of relief. Helen touched my arm gently. This is only the beginning. There will be trials, investigations, months of battles. Are you ready? I looked around the room at the guests, at the shattered expressions of people who had believed in the Jackson name, at Sophie trembling with her phone, at Hannah sobbing into her hands, and I felt something rise inside me that I had not felt in years. Strength. I am ready. Later, when the crowds dispersed and only a few of us remained, I stepped outside. The air was sharp with winter, the lake frozen under the moonlight. I walked to the edge of the dock where I had nearly lost my life. The memory of the water closing over me still haunted every breath, but tonight I stood above it unbroken. Ethan joined me, silent at first, then said softly, "You did it." I shook my head. "Not yet, but I will finish it." We stood together in the cold, the weight of the night settling. My dad was gone. My mother's voice finally heard, and the path forward was clear. Justice would not be quick, but it would come. I closed my eyes and let the wind whip across my face. For the first time in 12 years, I felt free. If you are still listening to my story, if you have felt the way betrayal can cut deeper than any knife, then you know why I could not stay silent. My fight is not just mine. It is for every woman who was told her pain did not matter, every daughter who was made to doubt her mother's love, every soul who has been buried under lies. If this story has touched you, share your thoughts with me. Tell me if you have ever seen karma unfold, if you believe justice always finds its way. And if you want to hear more stories of truth rising from silence, of betrayal turning into strength, subscribe and stay with me. Because my story is not over, it has only just begun.